Have you ever played a game of snooker where you felt you were playing really well, but then later compared it to a professional player on TV, or even another player in your club, and wondered how they were able to play the game to a standard that was so much higher than your own? What is it that they know that you don't? Interestingly, when somebody asks me for advice on the game, this is usually the first thing I explain to them. What they think they want to know is how to pot every ball and develop laser-like cueing. But even the best players in the world struggle with their cue actions at times, and what really sets them apart is what they know. And that's why they're most likely to be better than yourself, because they know far more about the game than you do. It's like they're playing a completely different game, because to them the game is so much easier than the one you're playing. Of course, it should go without saying, we don't have to leave things like that. That's why I've created this video, to help you understand the most important parts of the game. We do start with your technique, but we're only going to look at the bits of it you need to get right, and then avoid looking at things that make less of a difference and just make the game more complicated for you to understand. And what are we going to do instead? Well, make the game easier for you to play, by looking at a simple way to line up any shot you might want to take on, including shots down the cushions, as well as looking at the basic ways to use spin so you can get the cue ball to go wherever you want it to, so you can make your next shot far easier to play. And talking of which, in by far the most important section of this video, we'll look at how you can maneuver the cue ball around the table, giving you the best possible chance of making the next shot, including where you want to leave the cue ball when it's got a long way to travel and you're trying to play some complex positional shots. In a way, this is just a guide to playing an easier version of snooker. Without seeing you play, it's going to be almost impossible for me to assess what you might be doing right or even what you may be doing wrong. Which is why this video is designed to make the game easier for you to play, no matter what your ability. But it begins with what you need to get right. So to start off with, you're going to need to have confidence in your own technique. This doesn't mean giving you the ability to pot everything. It also doesn't mean making you overconfident, because you won't be able to do something just because you believe in yourself or somebody told you you can. We need to first get the basics of your technique right, the things that make the real difference, and then build up trust in that technique. Someone who lacks trust in their technique may find that closing their eyes on the shot may help them play better. This is because when they're looking at the shot, they may not trust the way they lined it up, or even their own cueing. So in this first segment of the video, we're going to look at building up confidence in your technique, so you don't have to close your eyes on the shot to be able to pot the balls. And later I'm going to show you how you can see you're doing the right thing. One of the best ways of making the game predictable and easy to play is to keep the same technique for a long period of time. The only problem is there are certain elements that you need to get right with your technique, otherwise you'll really struggle to strike the cue ball straight at all. The first of these is to have a set routine in between getting down on the shot and striking the cue ball. It doesn't really matter what this is, as long as it's consistent. Here's why. One of the most common reasons I see for missing a shot is when a player just gets down on the shot and strikes the cue ball right away, and doesn't really do anything in between. When I see this, I often think, how much better would this player be if they consistently took enough time? Almost always this is caused by a player not liking the shot they're about to play, and they'll have no idea how quickly they struck the cue ball. The best way to avoid this ever happening to you is to just simply make sure you have a regular pre-shot routine, and the better you are at completing the pre-shot routine, the less likely it is you are to strike the ball too quickly. Having a good stance is something else that's absolutely vital for your technique, and here's a simple way of working out where to stand. If we draw a straight line back from where you're aiming on the object ball and continue it across the floor, we get this, the line of the shot, and we can use it to work out the best place to stand. I can't say exactly where this is because everybody's different, but if you try a few shots with your cue foot on or around this line, eventually you'll find a position that makes potting the ball feel easier. You'll want to place your other foot slightly in front of your cue foot, but again, the exact position you put it in will affect the shot. Again, you may want to experiment, this time moving it slightly back or forwards until potting the ball feels easiest. Once you've found the best place to put your feet, just remember it so you can repeat it on all future shots.
When you're standing in the perfect place, the great thing is it just seems like you push your cue through and the object ball just travels automatically to the middle of the pocket without you having to think too much about it. When the tip of your cue's up to the cue ball, you roughly want your arm pointing straight down towards the floor, and that gives you maximum room for your cue to come back and go through.
But just remember, the distance between your bridge hand and the cue ball changes, especially when you're playing shots off the cushion. Here I'm holding the cue too far back because I haven't adjusted. Trust me, the pot becomes a lot easier when you're holding the cue in the correct place. Here you can see bending your elbow makes a big difference to your technique, but you need to bend it to be able to get your weight going forward onto the table.
But when you've got a fairly normal shot with your hand on the table, you do want to know roughly how much to bend your elbow, so try and keep in mind how much you usually bend it, so you can just keep this consistent. It's not going to help you cue the ball straight if your cue arm's pushed out to one side or the other. However, this isn't as bad a problem as you might think. So as long as it's close to going through straight, then I wouldn't worry too much about it.
Now for the things you basically want to leave alone.
Having a good grip and wrist action is vital, but this is one of those things that the more you think about it, the worse you're probably going to make it. So just have a good idea of where you hold the cue when you pull your hand all the way back and where it ends up as you push it through.
Someone may have pointed out, or you might have noticed for yourself, that you're not directly looking along the line of the cue, and there might be something up with your sighting. However, placing your head on the cue in a way that allows you to look straight along it isn't as simple a concept as you might think. Everybody sights the ball differently, but the majority of players will naturally sight in a way that's close to perfect. And if they adjust it at all, they're more likely to make it worse rather than better. It's probably something to just leave alone and do naturally. Striking the cue ball close to the centre will help your game in a number of ways. However, if you're in a quest for perfection, this can once again lead you to become inconsistent. If you can play the cue ball through the spots and make it come back and clip your cue at all, that's good enough.
I know it sounds mad not to want to change something that you're going to be certain you're getting wrong, but trust me on this, just keep the same technique for a couple of weeks and you'll see the difference it makes when you fully get used to it.
After we find Crooked from Aberdeen, Scotland, we can look at how your approach to the game can make it far easier to play.
So now we can start looking at other ways to make the game easy, and we're going to start off by what we need to focus on. Like on a shot like this, it's getting the cue ball here.
If you're regularly missing straightforward shots like this, then it's unlikely to be caused by your technique or even your sighting, as we discussed earlier. The most likely cause will be a failure to line the shot up properly or at all. So here's how you can line a shot up in just a couple of seconds. To start off with, imagine where the cue ball needs to go, directly behind the object ball in line of the pocket. Then imagine playing a cue directly between where the cue ball is and where the cue ball needs to end up. This won't be in line with the pocket, but if you push your tip along this line, you will pot the ball.
A thinner shot, you can actually use almost exactly the same method.
Except this time, if you push the cue through between the centre of where the cue ball is and the centre of where the cue ball will end up, this time you'll miss the red altogether, and this isn't a great way to line the shot up. So on a shot where you're striking less than half of the object ball, you can imagine using the side of the cue ball to pot it. You can use this method to line up any shot, however you do have to be aware the thinner the shot gets, the more the object ball will straighten up, although this is by a small amount and you'll probably allow for it naturally. But what does this all mean when you have a ball that's tight against the cushion? Well, in theory, on a shot like this, you want to strike the cushion and ball at exactly the same time. It's actually quite a good way of seeing if you're aiming where you think you are, but because this is the tightest angle to get into the pocket, it's quite difficult to play these shots hard. If you want to maneuver the cue ball around the table so you can play the most straightforward shots possible, then you're going to have to be confident at playing shots with basic spin. This includes top spin, where you get the cue ball to roll along the table after the object ball, a stun shot where you get the cue ball to stop as it strikes the object ball on a straight shot, and of course a screw shot where you impart backspin onto the cue ball and get it to spin away in the opposite direction from the object ball. This is the hardest of these reactions to get out of the cue ball, so how can you apply more backspin?
Generating spin is all about three things. The first of those is when you play the shot, pushing the cue all the way through. If you're not pushing the cue through and you're just stopping as you play the shot, you won't get nearly as much of a reaction.
The second is to try and avoid imparting unwanted side spin on the cue ball. I accidentally put some right hand side on this shot and it throws the cue ball a little bit wide. The third is a firm but smooth delivery. As you strike the cue ball, its resistance will slow the cue down. You need to push through against this to get any backspin on the cue ball, but the smoother you can do it, the more spin you'll generate. And generating a pin on the map right now is James from Nottingham in the UK. But now it's time, however, to look at how to start making bigger breaks.
Our last segment is probably the most important because it involves the individual shot choices, and that's going to begin with when and where to play safe.
It's difficult to work out what shots you should or shouldn't be playing, but we can have a look at that in a minute. Before, we need to work out what a safety shot is. Ideally, this is a snooker, preventing your opponent from seeing any object balls. Failing this, you just want to keep the object ball safe, in a location where your opponent doesn't have a direct pot. If you can't do any of that, you just want to keep maximum distance between the cue ball and the object ball, preferably keeping it near a cushion. This just makes the shots harder, however. It doesn't stop your opponent from potting them, especially if they're near a pocket.
The trick to snooker is to pot 90% of the shots you take on. However, this doesn't mean only playing shots you have a better than 9 out of 10 chance of potting, because you'll have a lot of shots like this where your odds will be far better than that, and you're more likely to pot them.
Shots that you're likely to pot over 90% of the time skew the statistics a little bit, but what does this actually mean? For the best results, you should always take on a pot that you have more than an 80% chance of getting, and ideally you should never take on a pot that you have less than a 70% chance of getting. In between 70 and 80%, it depends how you feel about the shot.
The reason not to go for too much should be obvious, but also the reason not to turn too much down is because eventually you'll be forced in to playing a difficult pot.
If you find yourself forced into playing a low percentage shot, you may wish you had attempted a slightly easier shot that you had earlier. This, however, is one of the hardest parts of the game to get right, and it's very difficult to say if you ever choose the correct shot or not. But if you do find yourself with a decent chance, here's the best way to maximise the number of straightforward shots you get in a row, and it all starts with a stun shot. On this break, I'm only going to play a stun shot and leave the cue ball exactly where the object ball was. Chances like this do arise, it's just a case of seeing them when they do. But it means I'm able to play 5 straightforward pots without any risk of the cue ball running out of position until I have to play down the table off the last black. When you have a straighter shot, just think to yourself, can I get away with just playing a stun shot?
That's never going to work all the time, however. You need a few more options. And the second one of these is just to roll the cue ball through to the correct amount. Here I'm not only rolling through for the blue, but I'm also leaving myself the correct angle so when I pot the blue I can finish on this red just by playing the same shot again. Here's how it works.
This break starts off with a stun shot because it leaves me in perfect position, but once I'm on the pink, I can simply roll through the correct amount to leave myself on the red. On all of these shots, I'm looking to leave myself the correct angle in 2 shots time. So after I pot this black, I'll have the right angle on this red to roll back onto the black again. All I now need to do is pot the ball at the correct pace, and notice how I leave myself the correct angle on the black to play down the table.
Unfortunately, on their own, these 2 shots are never going to be enough because you're never going to be left in the perfect position every time or have the ability to keep yourself in perfect position. So you're going to need 2 more shots. The first of those is just a simple screw shot, just simply screwing the ball back, which can be incredibly helpful sometimes. And the next is an angled stun shot.
Here the angle I have on the black means I can control where the cue ball finishes by how much backspin I have on the white. The more backspin I put on the cue ball, the closer to me the cue ball's going to get. So I've just got to judge how low to strike it in order to finish in all of these positions. So here's how all of these shots work together. I just start off with a stun shot that leaves me the right angle on the black. A screw shot then gets me back to a straight position on this red. Another stun shot. And now I'm going to play another angled stun shot, controlling the cue ball up for the next red. Then I can just run the cue ball through to leave myself the angle on the black again. A further angled stun shot gets me nicely in position on the red. And then, if you look where the red is, just stunning it in leaves me a great angle on the pink to go down the table. So I can just roll the cue ball through in that direction, and that's 31 points without having to do too much. When you're playing a positional shot over distance, you want to leave yourself the biggest possible area to land the cue ball in possible, and that's why 2 of these positions are a lot better than the other 2 for getting on the yellow. Here I simply pot the black and the cue ball automatically goes towards the yellow.
If you can think about playing the game in this way, it's going to simply make it a lot easier. But what's the best way to practice it?
If you want to be able to make 50 breaks consistently, then have a look at this couch to 50 break video. It's full of practice routines to help you make a 50 break. Or if you want to learn more about spin, have a look at this video. And remember, don't just watch play, and make the commitment to becoming a better player by subscribing to the channel and visit the website. See you later.